Low, urgent, restrained, for nearly 60 years, the Dodge Charger had one unmistakable heartbeat, a V8, firm, with a dark emotional drop. Then Dodge killed the HEMI. Quietly, deeply provocative. Now the name has returned, electric, but without the engine that made it a legend. Is it still a Charger? Warm, historical, authoritative. The story began. In 1966, calm, informative. Ford had transformed the market with the Mustang. Dodge wanted something larger and more dramatic. Quietly impressed. The first Charger was a fastback Grand Tourer. Its roof flowed into the rear deck, while rotating headlights disappeared behind a full-width grille. Expert with subtle fascination. Inside, it was even stranger. 4 individual bucket seats were divided by a center console. That stretched through the entire cabin. The rear seats could fold down, turning the Charger into an unusually practical performance car. Deeper, with growing power. But the option that mattered was the 426 cubic inch HEMI 5.8, officially rated at 425 horsepower. Slow, ominous emphasis. It gave the Charger something more important than a specification. Dark, decisive. It gave the car menace. Confident, nostalgic. But the Charger did not become an icon until 1968. Admiring cinematic. Dodge created one of the most recognizable shapes in American automotive history. A narrow waist, muscular rear haunches, a deeply recessed grille, and a flying buttress roof. That made the car look fast even when it was parked. Warmer, youthful energy. It looked dangerous. It sounded violent. And it arrived when muscle cars became symbols of youth and rebellion. Sharper building speed. Then Dodge took the fight to NASCAR. Technical, increasingly intense high-speed instability led to the 1969 Charger Daytona. With its pointed nose and enormous rear wing, fast, controlled excitement. On March 24th, 1970, Buddy Baker drove a racing Charger Daytona to 200.447 miles per hour at Talladega. Authoritative historic significance. It was the first official 200-mile-per-hour lap on a closed course by a NASCAR stock car. Deep, triumphant. The Charger was no longer merely a muscle car. Powerful, final. It had become a weapon. Lo, the triumph suddenly fading. The victory did not last. Cold measured. Insurance costs were rising. Emissions regulations were tightening. Horsepower ratings changed from gross to net, making the numbers look smaller overnight. Grave, historical. And then the fuel crisis made large engines feel like relics from another world. Restrained disappointment. By the middle of the 1970s, the Charger had changed from an aggressive muscle car into a personal luxury coupe. Calm, analytical. It became longer, softer, heavier, and more concerned with comfort than quarter-mile times. Understanding without defending it, Detroit was responding to a market that had changed almost instantly. Gasoline was expensive, and raw performance was becoming difficult to sell. Quietly, with regret, the Charger name survived. Lower, somber. But much of its character did not. Detached, almost disbelieving. In the 1980s, the transformation became even more radical. Plain, factual. The Charger returned as a compact, front-wheel drive, 4-cylinder, softly, ominous. Then, after 1987, the name disappeared for almost 2 decades. rising, restrained anticipation. In 2006, Dodge brought the Charger back. Dry, slightly provocative. This time, the controversy was not the engine, it was the doors. Expert, confident. The new Charger was a rear-wheel drive sedan. 4 doors made it practical for families, fleets, and police departments. While available, HEMI power preserved its attitude. Darker, with restrained amusement. The Charger pursuit became a familiar shape. In American rearview mirrors. More energetic, the same car could patrol an interstate and destroy its rear tires on Sunday. Measured, authoritative. It was not a recreation of 1968. Firm, approving. It was a modern interpretation of the same idea. Usable performance, with an intimidating presence. Low, mischievous anticipation. Then Dodge stopped being reasonable. Aggressive, controlled energy. For 2015, the Charger SRT Hellcat arrived with a supercharged 6.2-liter HEMI V8, producing 707 horsepower. Slow, incredulous emphasis, 707 horsepower. Darkly amused, in a sedan with 5 seats and a large trunk. Fast, visceral, but never shouting. The supercharger screamed. The exhaust shook windows, and every acceleration run felt slightly irresponsible. Building intensity. Later versions became even more extreme, culminating in final tributes, such as the King Daytona. Authoritative, admiring the defiance. While the industry moved towards smaller engines and crossovers, Dodge turned excess into a brand identity. Deep, triumphant. The Charger had returned to its original role, quietly dangerous. It was the rebel in the parking lot. Somber, controlled, but regulations, emissions targets, and the cost of an aging platform were closing in. Bittersweet, in 2023, Dodge launched its last call editions. The celebration felt like a victory lap, but it was also a funeral. Slowly, with genuine weight, the final Charger left the Brampton assembly line. One of America's loudest cars had reached the end in almost complete silence. Quiet, uncertain, and for the first time since the 1980s, Dodge was asking people to accept a Charger without a V8. Cold, futuristic. The new Charger Daytona did not attempt to hide the change. Technical, controlled, the Daytona Scat Pack uses 2 motors and all-wheel drive. It produces 670 horsepower and reaches 60 in 3.3 seconds. Quietly impressed, its shape recalls the 1968 Charger, while the front R-wing channels air through the nose. Intrigued, slightly skeptical. But the most controversial feature is the Frat-Zonic chambered exhaust. Measured, explanatory. The system moves air through chambers and uses electronic amplification to give the electric Charger a physical voice. Balanced, reflective. Some people hear innovation, others hear an imitation of something that should have been allowed to die naturally. Firm, revealing the central conflict. And that disagreement reveals slow, emotionally weighted, but speed alone was never what made a Charger feel alive.
Then Dodge revealed the other half of the story. The new Charger is not electric. The gasoline Charger uses a 3-liter twin-turbo straight-six called the Sixpack. It produces either 420 or 550 horsepower. All-wheel drive can switch to rear-wheel drive for traditional muscle car behavior. So the V8 is gone, but gasoline is not. The electric Daytona tries to reinvent muscle. The turbocharged six-pack tries to preserve it, without the HEMI. Maybe that is the lesson of the Charger's entire history. It has never been one shape, one engine, or even one type of automobile. It survived luxury, front-wheel drive, 4 doors, extinction, and resurrection. The Charger has changed before and survived. But without the HEMI, is it still the same rebel? Would you choose the electric Daytona, the gasoline six-pack, or keep the old V8 alive for as long as possible? Tell us in the comments.